Alright, welcome back to the channel. Warhammer Man back in the studio, continuing with our Warhammer 40,000 kill team, Octarius, Ork terrain. This is the Shanty Town, and if you haven't seen the previous videos, I highly recommend you go back and take a look at the last two videos we did, as we basically came from just a primer to where we're at right now. So if you're new to the channel, make sure you like and subscribe for Warhammer 40,000, H of Sigmar, kill team, Warcry, basically anything Games Workshop content wise, from reviews, unboxings, conversions, painting tutorials, magnetizations, Necromundo, whatever it is. If it's Games Workshop, I do it. So before we get started here today, we'll just do a quick recap. The first video, we went from the all black terrain basically, and got like a nice rusty look to everything. It took about 2 hours, and the second video we started to add in some of the more detailed metallics, the copper, and then also some color as well. So we're going to pick up here and continue on, and we'll see how far we can get today. Obviously there are a couple pieces of the kit that are not shown here. I actually just haven't started messing with those yet. Just wanted to start with the main stuff, and then I'll add in the last few pieces. Probably do a video for them afterwards, but I did want to get working on the majority of this stuff and get it ready for the table so that we could hopefully start doing some battle reports and playing some fully painted kill team. So I will probably be doing painting tutorials for like the Ork Commandos and Krieg as well. But in the meantime, let's get into painting here today. And the second video probably went, it was a little over 2 hours. So at this point in time, not including the time it took to clean everything off the sprues, and then, prime it, we're at about 4.5 hours roughly. So don't mind the little lights we had going there for effect. So I do actually want to do the blue next, I think, as we did like some of the red skulls already for the orcs there, and I'm going to do the other side pieces blue, so that we can use it as basically like two little bases or one. So today for the blue, we're going to be starting with Kantor blue. All the paints used are Games Workshop paints, but I have converted some of them over into dropper bottles. And then also the corax white I'm actually going to do first. There are a couple pieces of wood planks on here. And so I want to go ahead and do those planks first. Give it plenty of time to dry, as I'm going to be using contrast paints over top of those later. So I want to make sure it's nice and dry before I use the contrast paints, and hopefully we'll get to that today. So just got a random 3 brush today. Nothing too fancy. Just going to keep working through all this stuff. So I just want to get a nice coat of this white on here. This is the corax white, the base. It coats really well, obviously, as you can see. All these paints are just slightly diluted, just for the dropper bottles and ease of use, as typically Games Workshop paints are going to come a little bit thicker than ideal. So as far as like thinning your paints goes, I will use either water or like airbrush medium typically. Usually just water when I'm doing this, and then when I actually put stuff in the airbrush, I will use the medium. But there's so much pigment in these, and as long as you don't go crazy trying to like thin them out, they work phenomenally and still coat extremely well. And then obviously the coat on these doesn't need to be perfect, as we're going to be using like some of the Games Workshop contrast paints, because they just work so well on the wood grain. So all I'm doing is just getting a nice coat over all the wood here to start with, and then I'm going to just go along the edges and just pick out a little bit of what I miss as well. But you can see just even like slightly thinned how these are right now, and the convenience of the dropper bottles. They still coat extremely well. And one reason I really like this corax white is it doesn't streak. So if you had like a really flat, smooth surface, you can use this, especially just slightly watered down, and it's not going to leave like those awkward, chalky like brush marks. It doesn't make it look like you use textured paint over top of it. So Yes, we got a nice little coat on them. Just gonna do like the little sides of the main two boards. Again, these don't need to be perfect. One, because it's terrain, and then two, also just because we're gonna use like a dark wood on it, and the sides of these boards aren't really textured, so it's much less important. But overall, the set has been coming out nicely. After we get this on here, we just want to give it plenty of time to dry. And then when we come back with the contrast paint, we don't have to worry about like the stuff down in the cracks. Sometimes with the contrast paints, if it's not all the way dry, it will like kind of mix together and then it looks horrible. So just want to avoid that. And if we make any little mistakes or whatever, we can take care of that with just like a little cleanup with the brush or like a wash later on. So while I always try to make as few mistakes as possible, it's not like the end of the world. As because like it's not like uniform paint job here. If we do make a little mistake or whatever, it's not really going to stand out. It's just going to look like a different little dirty spot or rusty spot or whatever. So, and then obviously that's one nice thing about doing terrain as well, is it's a little more forgiving. So I'm not going to worry about getting like crazy on like the sides or anything. But I do want it to be like overly pretty uniform. So I'm just going to go a little bit down the sides here and here as well. And then there's like, you can see underneath, there's some stuff going on, but it's actually like the metal. There's like a couple pieces of like iron holding the whole thing together, or steel, whatever you want to call it. So I'm not going to paint those. And again, I probably got a little more detailed than I needed to, but I just want to make sure that I miss these. But I do want to paint the bottom of the wood. Again, I'm going to do just a quick job over here, as probably nobody is ever going to see these other than us watching right now. And a good way to do that is just make sure we get a nice coating up into the edge, but not even to get any closer that we would potentially make a mistake. It's just not even worth risking it and then having to come back and do a touch up, for especially for something that somebody's never probably going to see. So just being pretty careful. Alternatively, we could have done like probably like just a light dry brush on the wood. But I really like how the contrast paints come out, especially over wood. They just look really, really good because it picks up like all the grains and everything. So, and it'll also like take away from, I think the more kind of like different colors we add in, the better the effect is going to look overall. So what I'll probably do is I'll have, by the time this is all said and done, we'll have like the initial colors that we laid down for like the rust. We'll have like the lighter kind of steel color, and then obviously the transitions between everything. And then we'll have our red, some blue, some yellow, some wood, some white, and some copper. And that should essentially make up everything. And then maybe like some OSL lights there's like some little lights that go through the set. Not actual lights, but little Ork lights on batteries. Sort of strung like Christmas lights and everything. And so I'll probably do just a little bit of OSL on those, either with an airbrush for simplicity, or I might just do them with a dry brush, just because I know a lot of people don't have an airbrush. And also we've done some dry brushing on this. Typically I do one or the other, either airbrush or dry brush, because in many ways they serve the same purpose. And also might be nice to just skip the airbrush just because a lot of people don't have it. And then anybody following along painting their set that doesn't have an airbrush doesn't feel limited. But either way, I should make a video for how to dry brush OSL anyway. So why not make this the video? Or maybe the next one, depending how far I get today. Typically, I've been going about 2 hours on these. A little over on the last one, but been getting quite a bit done. But obviously, each step gets a little more meticulous, as I want to be careful not to mess up. But there's obviously a little less actual ground gets covered on each step. And that's typically how I will paint. I will start off with like the biggest surface area of whatever I'm painting, and then I will add in detail. The only thing that varies from that overall like strategy or style of painting is I will typically paint from the hardest to reach or like the center of whatever I'm painting out. So if I paint the hardest to reach stuff first, I'm just like painting the hard to reach stuff and then slowly going towards the easy to reach stuff. So once I have, basically the hard stuff done, the likelihood of me messing that up is much less likely. But if something's like exposed and easy to reach, there's no reason to paint it ahead of time and then potentially mess it up and then I have to come back and paint it again. If I'm just careful as I go, not to make mistakes, I find that I'm much more productive because I don't have to come back and correct things. As where, if you paint something that's easy to get to and do a bunch of it all at once, and then you're doing something that's hard to get to, you're more likely to make that mistake. And then you got to come back and fix whatever was easy to get to where you made the mistake. And by the time it's all said and done, you end up double painting a bunch of stuff when if you just would have made your life easier by doing it this way, you might get away without doing, barely as many touch-ups. If not, if you play it just right, no touch-ups, which is obviously the goal. Because if you don't have to repaint anything, you don't waste any time repainting something you've already painted. That is ideal. And a lot of times too, if I do make a slight mistake, if I know I'm going to be doing like some edge highlights or something like that, and the mistake that I made is going to get covered up by the edge highlights, I might not need to even go back and fix the mistake. Because even if, say I got some paint on something that I know is going to get edge highlighted later, but it's only on the edge, I might not need to even go back and fix it. So, but again, for me, being a commission painter and just the pure volume and amount of things I paint and the quality that it has to be, because I always try to exceed my own or, clients' expectations. The goal is obviously to be efficient. And, I hold myself obviously to a very high quality because we obviously want to deliver a product that's at least as good, if not better, than what someone's expecting because it's good for the business, good for repeat business, obviously good for the channel. And if you've never checked out any of the previous commissions that we have painted in the studio, highly recommend you go back and look at them. I've painted quite a few things and share a lot of cool techniques. Obviously do quite a bit of magnetizations and, lights and whatnot as well. So there we go. Got a little bit of the white laid down there. So now when we come back to it later, it will be dry. I'm also going to be painting these white at some point in time, like the orc faces. But again, the back side, we have some blue ones that need to be done. So I'm going to go ahead and paint the blue first, and then I will do the white all at once. Even though I do have a little bit extra on my palette, aka plastic bag. And just for simplicity's sake, sometimes I will use the wet palette, but it slows me down a lot because I have to clean it and take good care of it. As where if I just use a plastic bag like this, it's fully disposable, so I can just use it and throw it away. Just one of those little efficiency tricks that I used to, or that I like to mess with. So, yeah, so let's go to the blue next, and we can jump into that one. Went ahead and shook all this up pretty good before we got started. So this is going to be the kantor blue or contour blue. Don't mind those little T lights. If you're not familiar with those are the remote control T lights. Very cool. They have like a little remote and can like change all different colors. They're like LED powered with little batteries in there, or battery powered LED lights. Very cool. So yeah, let's get those going. And then there is one piece on here that I want to paint as well, blue. So this one already has some red on it, so I want to add a little blue so it kind of all goes together. And then I'm going to do all these surrounding bits around the face in blue right here. So we basically have sort of like a red and blue base, or when it's all combined together, obviously. It's just one base, but still kind of uniform. So yeah, we're going to do the same thing again. If we make any little mistakes, we want to make sure that they're made on the face, because we know we're going to be painting over top of that. I'm going to leave little bits of the metallic showing through around the edges to kind of simulate the effect that it has worn off. So it's sort of like a built-in edge highlight because it's already been essentially highlighted, because we have the metallics already from the painting we did previously. So I'm not as worried if I get any on the face right here. But overall, I want to leave like the edges and like the little bolts and everything, metallic as possible. But, again, we had kind of discussed it on some of the previous videos as well, that because this is orcs and because it's terrain, I'm much less concerned with any mistakes. And the goal is to find like that perfect balance between speed and quality. So you see, I'm just kind of like leaving little bits off intentionally, being a little bit erratic with the brush. And then anywhere around like the edges, I want to kind of leave the metallics exposed, but anywhere that's underneath a bolt would be less likely to be like exposed to the elements. So it's more likely to still have like the paint on it, assuming that, this was painted a while ago and it's kind of worn down. And then anything that's towards like the top or exposed would be more likely to have, some kind of like wear and tear on it. So that's what I'm going for. Just leaving off little bits around like the actual edges, as if it was like painted and some of the paint has worn off over time. And that's going to give us our blue. So each of these pieces, we did some in red, obviously, already. These have 2 of the faces on them. So again, we're just going for that same effect. Anywhere around like the actual face. I don't want to be like crazy sloppy or anything, but I'm not concerned about getting any of this paint on the face itself, because I know I'm going to paint that white later on. As where if I already painted the face white right now, I would have to be much more careful with this blue not to get it over the white that was already painted, or I would have to come back later and touch it up. So either way, it would be more time consuming or difficult for me if I didn't do it in this order. And that's what I mean about painting the hard to reach stuff first, and then the easy stuff later. So all right, so once again, I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to get an overall pretty good coverage, maybe just leave one little spot like that off, and then I'm just going to come around the edges, and as I go around the edges without looking too uniform, I'm going to intentionally miss some areas with the blue, so it looks like that it has worn off a little bit around the actual edges. And then of course I can come back later on and do some actual like metallic edge highlights if I want, or just kind of touch some of this stuff up as I'm going. if I want, but you know, it's not necessary as I've already added in like a little extra layering by just doing this right now. You know, alternatively, I could just go through, paint this whole panel black, blue, and then come back and do little edge highlights, but I wouldn't have like all the extra little rust effect and everything that went into getting like the kind of sporadic look that we have overall right now. So, and I mean, you could paint yours however you want. Obviously, you could do yours like much cleaner, much more uniform. You could do yours much sloppier and quicker. You know, whatever you want to do. But the goal is to just kind of show off a little bit of my tricks or tips that I have picked up, or just this one specific kind of technique in this video. So, not a huge fan of that spot I left off there before. But yep, once again, another one done. On to the next. You can see obviously a little too much paint on there. You can see obviously you know what we're going for here, and it doesn't take a ton of time. Not super meticulous either. More about just sitting down and slanging some paint. Sometimes that's the hardest part though, I think, about our hobby is you might have a million things you could work on, but maybe you got a bunch of stuff on your desk and you don't want to clean it off because you only have, you know, an hour or so to mess around. So by the time you clean it off and then and then you start to paint, you're not going to get that much done. Or maybe you're just not in the mood, or you're not sure what you should paint, or you feel like painting something else, but you know, maybe it's not primed yet. I think the best part is, or the most important part is to just like jump into it and actually get some stuff done. Because, you know, and that's the thing about your desk too. Obviously, everybody has limited space, just as humans. I feel like it's human nature that whenever we have like an open spot, we're likely to like fill it with stuff. So, you know, with your hobby area or desk or whatever, I think it's very important to make sure that you don't overcrowd it with random stuff. Because if you have stuff all over your desk, I think you're much less likely to get stuff done just because of like, you know, the little time it takes to kind of clear it off, get it ready, clean it up. You know, you might get distracted, might find a bit that you couldn't find. Or maybe you're like, oh man, let me look at a couple of videos on how to paint this stuff. And the next thing you know, you're out of time, you didn't get anything done. So I think for me anyway, the least potential distractions or, you know, things that could tie me up or mess with my productivity, the better. So I try to keep my painting area, you know, tidy and ready to go. Or you'll see a lot of times I'll have like, you know, old Warhammer boxes that I put projects on top of. That way, you know, if they're in the way, I can literally just pick up a box. It takes 2 seconds, you know, and it clears out a bunch of miniatures or whatever I was working on, and then doesn't slow me down, and I can just jump into my next project. So, all right, so that's what we're looking for. So now we've got some blue and some red. You can kind of see, obviously, looks pretty good. I didn't want it to be too crazy with the colors, especially with like orky stuff. I think if you have too many colors all over everything, it kind of starts looking like, I don't know, looking like a little, what's a good example? Like a Christmas tree. So by the time it's all said and done, I want to keep this to like just a few colors. I do want some colors, obviously, to make stuff like jump out. But overall, I want this whole shanty town to look like kind of old and worn down. Kind of all on like that same rusty, you know, palette looking thing. And it's cool because obviously the rust effect that we've got on all this stuff, you know, when I just like glance at it, if I haven't been like messing with it or I haven't been working on it or whatever, I'll like glance up and it looks like rust when I first look at it. Obviously, if you start looking at it, you know, you can tell it's all paint or whatever. But when I first just like glance up and see the project, I'm like, oh man, look at that rusty shantytown. I hope I don't get tetanus. I mean, I have my tetanus shot, so I am protected just in case. But But yeah, I'm just obviously trying to make sure that I get the parts that would be less exposed to the elements, which would be like the underside of all the bolts and everything. And then I'm just skipping little bits around the edges like we discussed, intentionally to make it look like some of that has worn off over time. And then, like I said, I can do some highlights, edge highlights, etc. later on. But part of what we did was keep like the metallic edge highlights towards the top and then like the kind of dirty rust look at the bottom. So it looks, obviously differentiation between it. So while we did everything essentially dry brushed and all in the same colors, it gives like a fade effect. And typically I'll do like a lot of times like a zenithal highlight, especially on terrain, which like it's weird because it's hard to pick up on camera because naturally the idea of the zenithal is to make whatever's on top the brightest. So typically, you're simulating your light source. So with the zenithal highlight, you're simulating the lights. And then whenever I'm doing a video or whatever, I obviously have like, a well lit area for like the camera or whatever. So a lot of times it doesn't actually like translate that well to the camera because it just looks like everything is well lit. But in all actuality, it might not be as well lit, or possibly, the highlights that you're seeing are actually painted on from like the zenithal light. So obviously, if you don't know what I'm talking about, check out zenithal highlights. It's essentially just typically a priming or painting technique, but very effective and also looks really good. So in this case, I wanted the metallics towards the top as I dry brushed it, and then like leaving like the orange brown kind of towards the bottom. So technically it's like a little brighter at the bottom and non-metallic. I think it will have a cool effect when we're finished. I don't believe there was any blue on the inside of any of these. I think it was all on the outside. And I can't remember if there was any other spots. I feel like that was it. There was maybe one more little blue spot that I was thinking. I did notice a couple other areas that I'll probably do. Like I didn't do like this little panel right here is bright and silver. But overall, I think that was it. So we've got a little blue on here now. We've got some red on here now. Overall, good look, I think. We can either do the white and we could just start on the red skulls and work our way back to this stuff. Or we could do some black right now for like the tires and some of the power cables. Or alternatively, could do. Yeah, I think I'll probably do. I think I'm going to go to the black. I do have this white right here that I could probably use up. Wouldn't be a bad idea. There's also like some random little dashboards that are like off of essentially like an orc truck. Did not really decide how I was going to do those. But I'm basically just winging it. But I think I want to do like this orc part of the truck, yellow right here. I think there's like a lot of yellow orc vehicles, so I think that would look good. And it'll be like kind of minimum how much yellow there is because there's not a lot of other ones. So let's see how this white is. Oh yeah, it's still pretty good. So yeah, go ahead and do this bad boy. So again, now that I've already obviously painted, a bunch of this, I want to be a little more careful not to make mistakes. It's not like the end of the world if I do, but I'm definitely looking to avoid them. But like I said, I mean, this was painted by orcs, not by me, so it doesn't have to be perfect. Just look like they made the mistakes instead of me. But if you have not gotten this orc terrain, I have a feeling, I mean, I assume that it will be available later on. I did see that they're releasing like a basically a new starter set for Kill Team. So that should be pretty cool. But it does not have, it still has the two gangs, the orcs and the Krieg, and it has like the scatter terrain, but it does not have all the big stuff, all this stuff. But I am assuming, and I think it's pretty safe to say, that the terrain will be offered separately, like in its own kits, at some point in time down the line. They did not release that specifically on their preview, but I think it's a pretty safe assumption. So again, I'm intentionally like skipping a little bit of the teeth, basically. I'm not sure if I want to paint those like teeth, the big straps, or not. I think that could go either way. Let's do the rest of it, and then we'll come back to it when we decide. See how everything else looks, and then hopefully that will make up my mind for me. I think that's another big thing too, is sometimes you like don't know how you want to paint something, and you almost get like brain lock. And then you start looking up pictures and trying to figure out how other people did it or how it's done on the box art, and then next thing you know, you stop painting and you're distracted, and 2 hours goes by, and then you're ready for bed or whatever. For me, I just want to keep rolling. Make sure I keep getting stuff done. So I think like in our world today, it's so easy to just get distracted and then forget what you're doing or run out of time. I'd rather just keep going, keep at it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's better if it's done than just half finished and perfect, in my opinion. And then again, I'm going to kind of leave intentionally some of the stuff towards the top, like unpainted and kind of worn down. And you can tell this is kind of drying because it's starting to do like the little white streakiness effect, which I hate. Obviously, the very top is going to be the most worn because of like rain. And I'm assuming because it's 40K, it's like some extra harsh rain, like acid rain or something like that. But yeah, that's the effect we're going for. So I think I like that how it is. What I'm deciding is, do I want to paint these straps white as well? And I think I'm going to leave it. I like how that looks without the straps painted. So, and now because I have painted the other side, I need to be very careful what I touch while I'm painting the rest of it. So, and obviously when I'm doing this and I'm leaving off painted areas, I'm specifically paying attention to areas where I made a mistake or was careless with the red to make sure that I'm not like missing spots that are messed up and painted red inadvertently because I was being sloppy when I did the last coat or whatever. Or, even if it's not sloppy, maybe just a little less cautious than I could have been. So if I notice there's already a mistake in red, I want to make sure that I cover that with the white, and then I can leave some of the exposed metal somewhere else for like, the rust kind of showing through. And I'm curious too if you've picked up this set and you're painting along this as well, or if you're painting something different or building something. Definitely leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you're working on because I am curious. I know I like to listen to other people's podcasts or you know, videos in the background, depending on what it is. You know, hobby or Warhammer videos, etc. While I'm working on my stuff. So when I'm filming these videos, I assume you were doing the same. So I'm curious what you're working on, if that is the case. If my assumption is correct. And you are, in fact, like me. And I assume you are because we have the same interests, or you wouldn't be watching this right now. All right, so again, I'm just being careful where I touch this at because I know the backside is already painted. Sometimes when you're trying to be random, you have to like go out of your way too. Like when I'm doing missing spots, I have to like go out of my way to make sure that it looks random. I don't want it to look intentionally not random. Like I miss spots but on purpose and then it starts looking uniform. And it's like obvious it was on purpose. But they left like lots of little cracks and everything. They kind of guide you where you can skip. And then obviously I like to always skip a little more on the top, like I was discussing. But yeah, I think that looks pretty good overall. Yeah, it definitely adds to the effect some. Cool, cool. So for the yellow, I have two choices to either use like an Averland Sunset, which is a pretty nice yellow, or to use the white and then contrast paints, which I love. The yellow contrast paint is like freaking amazing. But I think I'm gonna go the Averland Sunset route. But we've got just a little skull on here. Gonna be doing like a little wash over the metallics, especially the copper later on. But still just trying to be very careful. And again, anywhere that's like on the edge and kind of sketchy, we can just skip and intentionally leave unpainted as opposed to making a mistake. And it just looks like, you know, it was intentional that way. Or it just looks like it wore off, rather. You know what I meant. Not intentional. It was intentional, but it looks like it just wore away. And that's the beauty of terrain and orc stuff. All our mistakes look like they were orcs' mistakes or worn away by time. And I know, like, this set, I love Mad Max. Fury Road was, like, absolutely phenomenal movie. I've been, like, an old school Mad Max fan for pretty much my whole life. Literally my whole life, because I think the original Mad Max is older than me. But you know, that's what this terrain, like, reminds me of. Like, the full-on, like, Armageddon, like, Mad Max. And if you haven't watched, you know, obviously Fury Road was really cool. But the old school Mad Maxes are very cool as well. Although some stuff doesn't age because of like special effects and everything. Doesn't always like translate that good. Trying to watch like the original Star Wars movies. Plot wise, they're still excellent, but special effects wise, not nearly as good as like the newer stuff. But Mad Max, not quite as amazing as if they were done today. Um, you know, obviously, if they just redid the old ones exactly the same, but with today's like technology, they would probably be arguably better. But like Fury Road was just absolutely phenomenal. But if you have not seen the original Mad Maxes, they still translate pretty well overall, in my opinion. But I mean, Fury Road is like one of the few movies that like is better than like the original series, or at least as good. And again, I'm doing pretty good coverage on these. A little less wear and tear because I was kind of sloppy when I painted them, and I want it to look like, either the metal has worn through or it's like thoroughly painted. I don't want like a ton of spots where like the blue is like showing through and it really does just look like I slacked off and kind of did a mediocre paint job on it. But if you do a technique like this and you get used to it or whatever, you'll pay attention also when you're being a little sloppy, where you can be sloppy, because you can already kind of picture where you're probably going to be doing that little effect and leaving unpainted. So if I know it's going to be towards the top, I can be like a little more cautious not to make mistakes around those areas because I'm expecting to leave them like, exposed for like the metallics. So like anything, practice makes perfect, or at least as close to it as possible. And obviously that white stands out pretty bright now compared to everything else. Don't want to lay that down quite yet in case it's still a little bit wet. But this is such a great set. I have not played the new Kill Team yet, but I started kind of like looking through and reading the books, and it seems pretty awesome, honestly. Um, I did have a guard Kill Team in the previous edition, so just kind of looking through the Krieg rules and stuff, it looks a lot like that, and then also has some other stuff too. I'm not sure exactly. I haven't read through the actual rule book itself yet. I was looking through like little the one with like the orc rules and the Krieg rules in it. So I'm not sure exactly how to play and what has changed other than like the shape measurements, which were like super controversial, but now I feel like nobody really cares about because it's really not a big deal. I think for anything though, people like kind of fear change or just want to fight change at first. And then after a while, they kind of admit or like realize or just forget. And they're like, oh, this isn't actually that bad. Like, oh, I was probably just complaining for no reason. Which I think in our community, it's funny because it's mostly like grown men, like late 20s, early 30s, so, or really just late 20s and 30s. And I feel like we have like the most diva like group of people in that age group possible. It's like they complain about everything. I try to stay off of social media just because there's so much like complaining and negativity. But like I'm sure people were complaining about the deathcore of Krieg, and it's like, dude, I've waited for these forever. So glad that they made them. And the Orc Commandos, I was like, oh my gosh, they picked like two of probably the best units ever to make in plastic. And then I like hear people complaining. They're like, oh, I don't like how like big the deathcore of Krieg's hands are. Like just dumb stuff. You're like, that's what you're gonna complain about? You're gonna complain about the size of the deathcore of Krieg's hands aren't like proportionate to the models? It's like, what the hell is wrong with people? It's funny though. All right. Let's do this little guy here as well. I kind of dodge that big bolt right there. Yeah, pretty excited to paint like the actual models, but definitely wanted to knock out the terrain first for whatever reason. Well, I know exactly what reason. I'm painting like a million other models right now for some commissions. So the last thing I needed was like more models. As where with terrain, that's another thing that keeps me fresh on the hobby, mixing it up. Because I can be like tired of painting models and I can paint some terrain and it's not like tiring in the same way. Like I'm still excited to do it because it's something different. That could just be me though, but I do enjoy painting both models and terrain. I never used to, actually. I used to really, really enjoy playing, and that was all I ever wanted to do was play. And painting was like a tax. It was like Warhammer tax. Something that you had to do. You didn't want to do it, but you had to do it if you wanted to play in tournaments and stuff. And we used to go to like the games days and everything back in the day. Now it's cool that GW is like hosting their own events again. Because I think for a while, we're definitely spoiled now with like the amount of models, content. Now like Games Workshop's putting on its own tournaments. Like we're definitely spoiled. It's awesome that they do all of that stuff. Because back in the day they used to do it, and it kind of just went away over time. And we missed that stuff. That was awesome. It's also really good, if you're just getting like into the game or you've been in it for a little while and you've never been to an event. I mean, a local tournament is fun, but any of like the big stuff, Adepticon or like the Games Day or like the big tournaments, whatever they call them now, it's like a game changer because you can pack like, it's a growing hobby now. There's a lot more people obviously getting into it. It's much more popular than it's ever been. Just in general, I think miniature war games, skirmish games, if you're talking about Kill Team, etc., are like more popular than they've ever been. But it's still a pretty niche like hobby compared to some of the other nerdery that you can get into. So if you have the opportunity to go to like a big, really a convention for anything, you just realize you're like, oh man, like it's a big world and there's a lot of other people with the same interests as me. And they honestly, I think they're great for creativity. You see other people's armies. You see like their list composition, if you're playing in like a tournament or just playing some games or whatever, styles of play, tables, like terrain that's on tables. You just get to see like how other people do what you love. And, while you might somewhat copy other people's stuff or other people might copy yours, one, the chance of ever seeing that person again is highly unlikely because, they're probably from like all over the world. So it's not a big deal if someone copies you, and or vice versa, you copy them. And then two, also, you're not going to copy them exactly. They're not going to copy you exactly. They might give you an idea that's completely different, but for whatever reason, seeing that motivated you. It's like that inspiration or like the muse, your Warhammer muse at a convention. And it just gives you like this awesome idea, and then you end up making something awesome because of something you saw, even if you didn't copy it. I shouldn't say copy, but I mean, I'm all about like back in the day, you show some pictures online or whatever, and that, well, even still now, you like post some pictures on a forum or whatever, and then somebody will like, copy a conversion or a paint job or whatever it is. Back in the day, it was like, oh, I can't believe people copy me. Now I'm like, hey, more the merrier. That's what I love about YouTube is it like takes away that stigma and makes you like want to share your conversions, magnetizations, etc. Like motivates you to share with the community so everybody can have cooler stuff. Like something I do like some of the conversions on like the Custody Shield Captain like Relic Jetbike. It's like one of my favorite conversions. And like now, I've done a ton of them for commissions, but now I'll like see random picture on a forum or magnetizing like the arm and the stands for the Custody bikes. Like that's huge. You know, makes it so much easier to transport them. You don't have to worry about those big old lances breaking. Just stuff like that is like serves the community so much. It's a shame that, you know, for so long we like bogarted our awesome ideas and kept them to ourselves. Definitely one of the big benefits of social media, just being able to like share awesome ideas and content. But man, I'm not gonna lie though, those forums and stuff are just like the groups on Facebook and stuff. Oh man, if they're not toxic, I don't know what is. I can't imagine. Like, I don't have all the different forms of social media, but I know that's enough for me. It's already too much. And it definitely like sucks you in too. Next thing you know, you're like 2 hours in and you're mad, getting in like an argument with somebody on the internet, or just reading someone's post on the internet and you're like, oh, how ignorant. And then it's like, wait a minute. Why am I even reading this? There we go. Nice. All right. So that obviously added a little bit more depth to everything. The white for the boards are done, so we could definitely go that route. Um, Probably gonna do, yeah, I think I'm gonna go through and do the little gauges that are lit up and paint them white. Could have just knocked them out while I was going, if I would have thought about it. Yeah, I'll probably do like OSL on these lights right here, one way or the other. But I'm gonna go ahead and paint these little gauge lights. Being like somewhat careful, but to tell you the truth, I'm just gonna use like probably Tesseract Glow. It's like the green technical paint. It's basically a contrast paint though. I'm not sure why it ended up as a technical and not a contrast, but basically it is. It's mislabeled in my opinion, but it's great. It's an absolutely awesome paint. Works phenomenally. Such a cool effect for like eyes on like helmets, or a glow on like gauges or something like this. Obviously, or I wouldn't be using it. Again, I'm going to be careful where I'm touching as I spin this around, but I just want to double check on the inside. Again, I'll probably use like probably do OSL on that, so I'm not worried about that for now. And there was nothing on that piece, so just gonna grab the other one here. And again, because I'm painting like the gauge that's down in there, and because it's gonna be like glowing, I'm not that concerned with getting it on like the edges or whatever, because later on I can always go back through, and it's really easy to just do a little bit of the copper back over top that if I need to. So I'm just being like cautiously fast, if that makes sense. But I do want to wait a while because this white is like pretty liquidy, and it's definitely like builds up down in there. So the last thing I want to do is like throw that green on there before that's dry, because it's going to give me like that mucky effect I was talking about earlier. And let's check these out. I feel like a couple of them had little gauges, but one was like on the wrecked truck, so it was like the little dash from the truck. So I don't know, like this one here, I'm not sure if I'm gonna actually have that one lit up. I feel like it would just be laying there. And then these are like the little Christmas lights around there. I'll probably do, or I'm gonna do OSL on those. I'm just not sure how. See, I'm not gonna do these gauges like that because I want it to be like the glow effect. And then nothing on this. And then I already checked that. And then I'm going to do OSL on the eye on the back of this piece. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that's it. I didn't really look. I'm sure that's good by now. Again, there's like little lights inside there. I'll do them with the OSL, either dry brush or airbrush. Nice, definitely looking sweet though. Definitely coming along nicely. Looking awesome. So the real question is now, do I want to come in with the Averland Sunset on that little piece of the crashed buggy? Or do I want to do the contrast white? So I think I'm going to go Averland Sunset. There she is. I love these dropper bottles too. Took a little bit of time to switch them over, but I did like, maybe like 3 or 4 or 5 at a time as I needed them. I did like a few up front and then just kind of added in out of my collection as I went. Some of them I only filled up like halfway. Some of the thicker ones I diluted a little bit more, etc. But it was probably the best thing, like single-handedly, that I've done, like for my paint set, etc. So, and I use the Army Painter ones. You could buy like the cheap ones, on like Amazon or from China or something like that. But they work great, and any little extra paint that you waste by pouring out too much, that you don't need, easily is made up for by the fact that you don't have like all the crusties and have to clean around the edge and worry about like knocking over one of your Citadel pots, whatever the situation is. So again here, I'm going to go mostly coverage, but assuming obviously this was a car and then the front is the top, or the top of this was the front of the car, I definitely want to have a little more wear and tear towards the front, because I'm assuming before this car got wrecked, it was going fast. So I want like the paint to be worn off on that front edge right there, and then around like these little bits right here and whatnot. So you can see I'm obviously like intentionally doing a mediocre job. All right, so that's a little too much paint, I think, right there. I want to keep it down because I don't want it to like run onto any of the other stuff. Yeah, that come out pretty good. It's like a little bit on the edge there, but nothing too crazy. That same thing here. And then wherever we have like the edges, you know, it's especially exposed towards the front, the paint is probably going to be the most rubbed off. And then like places like the back side of those little teeth that are sticking out is where, basically like the tooth itself, like the little edge behind it, was probably blocking the paint, so it's less likely to be worn off. And then anywhere where you have like, you know, a little crater, divot or whatever, or like something, it's going to be less likely to have worn off there. Like around it, it'll be more worn off right here. You know, but then like down in the hole, there might be like a little paint left, but some is worn off, etc. So I'm just trying to like simulate that kind of wear and tear. So as we kind of go in here, and again, it doesn't need to be perfect, but like this little edge right here, I would assume that, you know, the paint would be worn off here as I'm kind of going, chipped off and stuff, and then a little more right there, a little less around the corner there. But it doesn't have to be perfect. And if you're not sure how to do that, or you're kind of new to it or whatever, you can easily pull up like a worn picture of something online and then kind of get an idea how to do that or what I'm talking about if you're not familiar with what I'm doing here. And then after that, it's just like randomness. Like I'm just going to leave a couple little bits of paint towards the front. But again, I want it to just look like it's mostly worn off there. And then same thing here. I'm just going to put a couple little bits of paint along that edge. A couple little spots along here. But for the most part, I want it to be worn off. And then this back edge would be mostly intact. Then just going to kind of connect it in a couple spots. And theoretically, when it's all said and done, you know, it looked like obviously it was a car that was going fast. You can see this is watered down a little bit, so it's not getting amazing coverage. So I may need to add in just a little bit, like a second coat or whatever, to just kind of clean it up a little when it's done, if need be. But that is part of the trade-off with not getting like the streaky effect, and then also being able to go into dropper bottles, which is definitely worth it. So, and then obviously this would be, you know, if the car was facing us, so then we can decide, do we want underneath to be painted? Do we want to leave it those colors? I don't think I'm going to paint the underside of it, the back side of it. I like how that looks right there. I'm going to wait until this is dry before I go through and do any more paint on it. I don't think there was any other spots. I feel like that was the only one I was going to do in yellow. Thought about doing like the dash or something like that, but I think I opted out. There was a couple little silver spots I noticed I had missed along the way. Yeah, I think that's it for now. So we've got a couple extra little bits of color added in now. It's not like overly colorful, I don't think. I didn't want it to be like overboard, but definitely wanted to add in a little bit. There was a few spots of silver that I noticed I still needed to do. Go ahead and touch those up while I'm thinking about it. We've got our leadbelcher. There's like that little panel. You know, I basically painted all like the mesh bits when I went through before. And, you know, honestly, when I first started doing this and it was all just like one color after like the dry brush step, it really just all like blends together and there's just so much freaking detail. You're bound to miss something. And then I painted the first half of this right here and I missed this half of it. So this piece like goes all the way across. So again, as I continued painting some of the other stuff, I started to notice that. So we'll get that piece. I think that was it on this one. The back side probably would be a good idea. Looks good. And then I think I decided I was gonna do this piece in silver. This was like the grill off of the car, or off of a car. Do want to be careful. I got that yellow right there, so I don't want to touch that, obviously. Not sure what color I'll go on the teeth, or the teeth, I should say. Not gonna worry about it being perfect either. Obviously, no one's ever probably going to look at this as close as we are right now, and then we may come back through at some point in time and do some random little washes here and there. But one of my favorite techniques is if you're going to dry brush, especially on models, it leaves like almost that little chalky little dusting of paint around everything after you like dry brush, and I don't love that look. So I like to go back and wash afterwards. But on this terrain, the goal is not to have to wash everything, because it just takes so much time and it's so messy. And then when you're doing terrain like this and you're doing like a ton of surface area, you have to wait so long in between for it to dry, because it like collects down in the cracks and everything. So I did not want to have to do that. So part of the goal with this style of painting that I'm doing is to avoid having to wash everything. So while I will still probably do some washes along the way, I did not want to have to do like a dip or a wash on everything. So that was part of, just my experience with terrain in general, and part of my decision to paint in this style. So for like this specifically, I decided I was going to do either airbrush or dry brush. And, just because the setup and everything, I decided to go with the dry brush. And I'm glad I did. So far, I love how everything's coming out. And, obviously it's only getting better in my opinion. So definitely glad I went this route. And also, I wouldn't be able to get nearly as much done. And I would be going through so much wash and taking so much more time if I was like dipping or washing all this stuff, because there's just so freaking much of it. There was a couple little spots of like the exhaust I decided I was gonna do, like this little bit down here. There was a couple little spots like that, I feel like. Yeah, here's another one. Decided I was gonna do this piece. And that's another thing too, is just by spending a couple minutes before like I started today and just kind of looking over stuff and getting an idea how I wanted to paint and what I wanted to paint, what colors or what areas I had missed or whatever. Once I'm actually painting, I'm less likely, if I just spend a minute before I go, I can basically pick out the spots I missed before, or spend less downtime when I'm actually painting, trying to decide what color something's going to be, etc. So I'm going to leave those bits rusty right there. I like that. I decided I was going to do cloth on this. It looks like it's basically like a heat wrap. So I should have painted that white, but I didn't. Obviously, good example of missing stuff, but not a big deal. So we got some silver touch-ups on those ones. The tools I think I'm going to do, they could be rusty, I suppose, but I like to think that they would probably be less rusty. And then also maybe they'll just stick out a little more, catch your eye. I do have a rusty pair of pliers that barely works though. There's like a little cloth on the handle right there too. That would be pretty good to do in cloth. So hopefully I'll remember to do that later on. There's those tools done. There's those bits done right here. There was a couple spots on these I had picked out that I would do in silver. There is the little coilovers, like spring on the coilovers. I mean, you could go through and do like every single like bolt and nut head on like this whole thing if you wanted to. I have no interest in doing like all that. So I just try to like pick out a few key things that would like grab your attention. I like to think that over time, the dry brush picks out enough stuff for me, and then everything else got rusty. So, what else? I think maybe something down here. I could do like, there's a bunch of different wheels all throughout. So I think you could do like either that same copper or metal on like a lot of these different wheels, just for like little areas to pick out. Basically just looking to like accent the overall thing. So some of these little like bits and details catch your eye. But the goal is, one, to get this done in a reasonable amount of time. Two, make the whole thing look kind of like uniform and old and worn out. But also, I just want to pick out enough details that, stuff catches your eye and they're like, oh, that's cool. But not that I have to paint like every single bit on like this entire set because there really just is so much stuff. What else? Not sure what some of this like stuff down here all clustered up is. I think we could do like this little part of like the doors locking mechanism. All right. Looks pretty good there. I think that's plenty. Yeah. And then I'm going to do the other piece that's the same because now that I just did that piece, it's going to make me think what I just did and I can kind of go through and just knock out those same bits. So theoretically, it would be easier. For whatever reason, I left the other one of these copper and this one's going to be silver. Just cuz. Yep. And then we're going to do that spring again here. And it looks like I might have already done this one. Or maybe the dry brush did it for me. I'm not sure, honestly. I think I already did this one. It's double done now. And then you can do, maybe just do the wheel on this one instead. Mix it up a little bit. Instead of like that little motorcycle engine block or whatever it is. Looks like an air-cooled little engine piece there, or a head or whatever. Not worried about making this perfect. Because if it's not rusty, it can easily be dirty, and that can explain why it's not like 100% perfect down on there and everything. But yeah, it looks good. And I believe I could go back and do this as well. And the only reason I'm even doing some of these pieces, especially that's like on the inside of the train that you'd probably never see, just a couple little accent details. Because honestly, like you're never probably going to notice this. But if you have just like one little bit that's silver or something like that, you're more likely to probably have it catch your eye. All right, so now we have both those done. So now let's do our other piece. And again, just going to kind of pick out a couple things. So this looks like some kind of thing that would be different metal. And I just try to picture like what different metal or what piece would not be rusty or why. Obviously, if anything has been used recently and has like action, like a piston type thing or something like that, the part that's going up and down, like on the oil pump, should be like fairly, you would think it would be like oiled or whatever, so it wouldn't be like as rusty. So I got go for like stuff like that. And then there's like this little bit on what I imagine is some sort of like exhaust or something like that. I'm not sure if that's a fire hydrant or whatever, but probably should do that in like copper if I wanted to. Inside here, this stuff looks pretty good. Picked out some of these details already. There's some tools up in there I could do if I wanted to, but they look like they're going to be a pain to reach, so I'm probably going to pass. I think I decided I was going to do, I did not do that piece on here, but we'll go ahead and do this one here. It's like a different metal. Looks like it could be metallic. And again, I'm trying to keep it pretty clean overall, but like I went over right there, not a big deal. Not worried about it. Just because, there's all kinds of other little metallic spots. If somebody notices that one in this whole thing and that's what catches their eye, they're obviously spending too much time looking at this. Way too much time. Because I will probably never notice that again. Maybe could do like the fan right there. I don't know. I kind of like that rustiness of the fan. And there's also a bunch of steel already up on top of there. So I'm going to leave that alone. This looks good in here. I'm going to do that same one again right here. Looks good. There's like a little dashboard or something right here. That wheel, just random stuff you could pick out if you wanted to. I like how this looks though. I mean, to tell you the truth, when I do the final effect on this too, anything that's at the very bottom of it is going to kind of get like a little sandy color over top of it, so it's not going to be very visible anyway. I want it to look a little bit like lighter, like almost like a Xandri dust color, so that, it blends in with the table and basically reflects like the little like bits of like dust and sand and stuff like that getting like blown up onto it from the ground. So yeah, I think we're doing pretty freaking good. I was thinking about doing some kind of metal on this because this is all just like one color. I did not spend enough time picking out what I would do though. There's so much stuff on here. So maybe we'll just do a couple like random things right now. Um, Maybe just do like this bolt. Once this bit has like all the other stuff added onto it though, I think this will kind of blend in because it has like the little platform and then like the actual like tanks too for like the oil, and then there's like the big piston and there's like a little ladder. So I'm not that worried about this all looking one color for now. Or like too uniform, because like this piece will be on there and then all the other junk too. So I think that'll look good when it's done. So yeah, I feel like there was one other spot that I really wanted to do that I had missed. There was something else. Oh yeah, that panel right there. And the only reason I'm doing that, it's like that just one of those different types of metal that I just picked out that I would do differently. And it looks like I got a little sloppy over here too, with the copper as well. So gives me a chance to kind of touch some of that up a little bit. Yeah, that's it. That's why I'm doing it. Yeah, that looks good. And then it's got plenty of stuff done on here. I was thinking about doing this piece right there. I think I'm going to do it. And then maybe this right here. I think this was just like the guns on the plane. at one point in time. Looks like that's like the little ammo feed. So I feel like that's a good place to go. We had on time, about an hour 20. It's not bad. Trying to do these at about like roughly the 2 hour mark. So I went a little over on the last one. But the first one was right around 2 hours. I like to pick like a good stopping point. And then typically if I set like a goal for myself, I try to overshoot it as opposed to undershooting it. So like because I overshot my goal last time of 2 hours, I won't feel bad if I cut this one a little short or whatever. As where if I cut the last one short, then I'm like more obligated to do the full out 2 hours this time. Or else next thing you know, each video is only like an hour long, etc. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and paint the back of this panel. The front is like this leadbelcher silver color. So, and then also it will give me a little more color and diversity on the back here. Yeah, that looks good. And then there's a bunch of different rims right here. So maybe I'll do one of the rims silver. Um, Maybe I'll do this one here. You know what? I like those rims. All dark. I guess we'll do this one. Not worried about getting it down in the cracks and everything there. Gonna just go more for like a silver edge on like the visible stuff. Nice. All right, all that looks good now. I feel like that was the part that I was missing before. So I think we could come in now with probably the black. There's a couple tires that I want to do in black. And then also the cables. We did like the red cables before. I want to do those. I want to do the tires, the cables in black. I want to do the wood effect on the wood, obviously. And then we'll see how that yellow looks once that's completely dry. So here we have of course it's pretty beat up, but the contrast paint black Templar. That's one of my favorite. Oh, and that's like a little paint thing. Obviously it's very dirty, but it's like a 3D printed thing to stop your paint from spilling. If you don't have those, highly recommend them, as it has saved me on quite a few occasions. So there's like some little metal bits around here, and then obviously like the actual tire part as well. So I'm gonna do my best to skip the metal bits, but honestly, there's so many of them. It probably makes sense to just do the tire black and then come back and pick out the metal later. Just because there's so freaking much. There's like all the little edges. So we'll see. I'm gonna do my best as we go here. See how it looks, and then I can clean it up later on if need be with some metallics. Tire's in pretty rough shape, so not surprised that it ended up in the scrap bin. Just try to go around these main. I guess this is some sort of thing to get better traction in mud or sand, I'm guessing. That's why it's got like all these little weird ridges on here. Not really sure, to tell you the truth. And if you've never used the contrast paints before, they're like perfect to just go right out of the pot. In my opinion, no need to switch them over to a dropper bottle. I know some people still do, but I have never found that to be necessary. No need to water them down or use any kind of thinner on them, like the contrast medium, unless you're doing something specifically where you want to use it almost like a glaze. But overall, I find them like perfect right out of the pot. So, and this black actually coats very, very well. Some of them are a little more opaque. Some are more like of a glaze or translucent, whatever. This black is like perfect. I very rarely use any other black but this black. I will use oftentimes like a batten black on the base rims, but I pretty much use this for like all like the bolter casings, like any other time when I'm using black now. This has like pretty much replaced like 90% of the time when I would normally use a regular black. So yeah, that's our tire. Looks pretty good there. I feel like I got everything I want. I want to leave like the actual, I can't tell if that's supposed to be the ridge of the tires. Yeah, I feel like it is. I feel like that should be black. Feel like these are the regular ridges of the tire. Like the tread part. And then the metal parts are like in between. Yeah, that looks a little better. Like more like what it's supposed to be. Nothing too wet on the bottom there to set it down. I don't see any actual power cords on that one. I think it's just the tire. Here we've got another tire and then a couple power cords as well. So because the tire is kind of like more down and out of the way, I'm going to do that first. I'm going to start here at the bottom so that will have more time to dry. So when I set it down, the paint's not still wet when we're finishing up on this. Not that it matters. I mean, this little like board slash painting display setup I use is not like meant to be kept perfect or anything. I mean, I don't go out of my way to like try to ruin it or anything, but I'm not worried if it gets a little paint on it or whatever. These are like little spikes. I feel like if the Ork vehicle can like get close to your vehicle, like smashes it into you, and then his tires pop your tires. Like little pointy teeth sticking out of this. Crazy resourceful orcs. And that's why I love it. It's like full on Mad Max. Like there's just so much detail went into this. Like if you start looking, like really looking through here, you can see there's like a bunch of like little bits that were like scavenged from the sector Sanctoris, like Imperial sector stuff. Like little power boxes or like the little vents and stuff like these things. It looks like they basically like took pieces of an Imperial city and like scrapped together like the little Ork Shanty Town. Very, very cool. And just the amount of, I mean, obviously that all the other stuff Games Workshop does has like an immense amount of attention to detail. But the fact that essentially this whole set is just made out of little bits of junk from other stuff, There's just so much extra detail in it that you don't even notice until you start spending, like, at this point in time, I'm at like basically 5 or 6 hours, like close up and personal with this set. And I still am like noticing random little details and cool stuff. I would say this set is probably a 9 out of 10, as close to perfect, if not perfect. I would be tempted to say 10 out of 10, but Games Workshop puts out so much cool stuff that I'm sure they'll like outdo this eventually. And I don't want to already be maxed out. All right, cool. So now I just want to be real careful where I'm touching here. Make sure I'm not touching the back where I just painted. So I basically put my hand in like a good position and then attempt to not move it around unnecessarily. Is that the rim? Yeah, I feel like that's the rim. So I'm not going to go out of my way to like paint that black. I'm going to leave like the little rusty rim. All right. Just a little bit on the bottom there. So I want to do these. Oh, you know what? I think I'm going to do these chords in red. So that should be our power cord. There's like a little battery pack hooked up there too. Nothing necessarily on here I want to do in black. So I think the power cords are the next main thing I want to do. So we'll see. I already did obviously the red power cords here. So I'm just going to go through and do its little power cord friend. So we have a positive in red and the negative black. Assuming this whole entire rusty thing is not grounded. But it probably is. Let's be real. Might be so rusty that the ground is no longer effective. It's not a ton of like wet paint on this right here, but just being cautious of where I just painted. And again, I'm not going like crazy trying to make sure that I get like full coverage of the whole exposed wire. I'm mainly focusing on like the top. Can always do like a little wash around the edges so it like can collects like down in the recesses. And but again, I just want to make sure that getting like the most obvious part, at least like the top third of the wire. But if I like miss a little spot or whatever too, I feel like it just looks like there's like a little bit of like the rusty dirt kind of around it or whatever. So it's not as important that it's perfect. Okay, so we got those wires. I feel like that was the main part I was looking to do. Go ahead and do this one next. I know I was saying just do like the other one that's the same. think the tires were honestly the biggest part that I was looking to do in black. The tires and the wires. Oh yeah. So there is 3 wires right here. I can either do both these ones in black or do the other one in another color or leave that one alone for now. I think that's probably what I'm going to do. All right. I don't think there was any tires around this piece. Nothing else crazy I wanted to do there. This is probably the hardest part right here. Because I'm holding like something small so far away from my face. I feel like normally I would be much closer, but the camera is basically right where my face would be or close to it. So you guys are getting my view, and then I'm getting like the over the shoulder view, the second class citizen view. So because this is going to sit upright, I'm more concerned with getting the top of these wires painted than say the bottom, just because you're more likely, I feel like, to notice that. I think I just painted the opposite one here, but they're kind of like clustered up together and then you can't tell which one's which, so just keep it unique, keep it fresh. All right, so that's good there. We got the other wire here, but we're not doing that one. Let's get out of here. What a nice set though, man. And great value too. It was pretty cool that they basically let you, if you didn't get the opportunity to buy this set, that you could basically order one and have it made to order. I don't think it was actually an issue because like it sold out originally where I'm at, like right away, like continental United States, East Coast. But then it was actually back up for like a week, like right afterwards. Maybe it didn't even sell out right away. Within a few days, it was marked as like sold out on their website, but then it was no problem after that. But the store I go through had absolutely no problem getting them in and in large quantities. So whatever they did, whether they just made a ton more of them or it wasn't as popular, which I mean, it's not like the main game, so that doesn't surprise me that it would be like not as popular as 40K. But it is part of the 40K universe, so I would expect it to be more popular than Sigmar, if that makes sense, but not as popular as Big 40K. I think that's a pretty safe assumption. Let me get a better angle on that. I had no problem getting them, so I assume no one else had any issue with getting them, but what a great set and great value too. I have not built the Krieg or the Orcs yet, but I like that they have like a ton of different options in the set as far as like weapons and all that stuff. or like specialisms, whatever you want to call it. The video trailer that they did was like the coolest freaking video ever. I was watching the Paint Bravely podcast, or should I say listening to it the other day, and again, another review for the Warhammer Plus that was just not that good. Um, Definitely sounds like overall people are just not impressed by it. I did not end up pulling the trigger like I was saying in the last video uh, because of like that little gift card issue. I basically had a gift card that was about to expire and I hadn't used it. So I was like about to order Warhammer Plus to get the model more than anything, the cool Vinegar Assassin. But I figured, oh, that's cool, you know, see how it is, and I can let everybody know what I think about it, whatever. Like overall, I'm pretty much an optimist when it comes to Games Workshop stuff. But I couldn't actually do it because it like redirects you to a different site, and you don't actually like pay through Games Workshop. So I couldn't use the voucher, and I was like, it was about to expire, so I went and focused on using that. So I did not end up getting it, and then it started popping up in my feed. So I was like, well, I'll check this out, see what other people said about Warhammer Plus. Popping up on my feed, you know, see if it's good or bad or whatever. That's old and useless. See if it was like good or bad or whatever. And honestly, it seemed like every review was terrible. And I know it's like a new service, so I would expect, you know, it to get better over time. So it's probably the worst it's going to be now and will only get better over time. But it just seems like everybody was hating on it. I think the Paint Bravely podcast, which is like Brent from Goovertown Hobbies and I can't think of his name, but from eBay Miniatures Rescue. Both like, you know, pretty good channels I like to watch. They're entertaining. I think Brent has like some of the best, most unique Warhammer content of anyone. So I'm a big fan of his. Goobertown Hobbies, if you've never checked that out, or Paint Bravely podcast is the two of them together. And then the other channel is eBay Miniature Rescues. That's a cool one too. He basically gets like, you know, cheap models or like pretty much wrecked models off of eBay and like salvages them, obviously, hence the name. Goobertown Hobbies is Brent's channel, and he's just sort of like a little bit goofy, or maybe a lot of bit goofy, but good painter, gets a lot of stuff done, does like cool themed videos and stuff. Both of them have nice quality. Brent's is probably one of the best quality, like camera footage and also quality like of content in the community. So if you have not checked out those two, though, I highly recommend them. But I was watching theirs, and they had a lot of like what I would say are good and viable. I don't want to say concerns, but maybe like arguments or statements, whatever you want to say. Made sense. Everything they said, basically, I felt like they weren't just being haters. I felt like they were basically saying like, overall, the quality of like the filming and stuff like that is not the best. You know, compared to somebody that's been on YouTube like them and done it for years and got like the quality down and figured out all like the little tips and tricks that you need to do over time. Missed a little skull right there. Um, so it makes sense. You know, obviously they've been doing something for a long time. They spoke very highly of the masterclass and Louisa, but that maybe like, you know, there was a couple things that they could fix up over time with them, skipping some steps that like you want to see, obviously, or, you know, not having the best. I'm going to do this up close real quick because it's tiny. Not having like the best camera angles or cameraman, etc. But again, I think those are like more you know, stuff that you'll get better at, or the quality will like go up over time. But then also they said there's just not a lot of content on there, which obviously it's brand new, so it's going to take some time. They're only going to have more content like every week adding on to it. But overall, it just seemed like there was a lot of neutral to negatives. So it seems like the more reviews I watch, the less likely I am to get Warhammer Plus, unfortunately. And that really is unfortunate. Because I literally look for reasons to spend money. I think like everyone does. Where is there an exhaust piece that has a wrap on it that I missed? I know there was one earlier. because I remember noticing it and being like, oh, I see you. There was that piece right there, but there was another piece somewhere else. Oh, it's on this guy. There it is. That little guy there. It's like heat wrap that you would put on like a motorcycle's exhaust or something like that. It's like, I think it's like a fiberglass like cloth basically that you wrap around it. So I want to paint that white so that I can contrast paint it later on. I think that was the only one I noticed. Obviously two of them, one on this one and one on its evil twin, aka the blue one. But yeah, I mean, we're definitely getting close to, I don't want to say done, but to where like this is acceptable. Like I feel like obviously at this point in time, it is like tabletop ready or quality. Like enough detail is painted that even though every bit of everything hasn't had like extra detail painted or hand detail painted, that at this point in time it's more than acceptable for like gameplay. Now granted, unfortunately I did skip like some of the smaller stuff and not do that, and some of the bits for like the oil rig, so I'm not quite finished yet. Not quite out of the woods yet. But I think at this point in time, you know, enough of it is done and like tabletop acceptable / ready. All right, so I want to do 13 minutes left to 2 hours, roughly. Doesn't have to be perfect, but that was like my preset goal. So what are my options right now? I want to do the wood grain with the contrast paint. There's a couple wires I want to do in red still. Basically like this wire on here. And then I'm sure there'll be plenty of other stuff that I will want to do. But I think that will do for today at least. And then getting close to where, I don't want to say like this set is done necessarily, but to where like, you know, I would feel happy with calling this like playable. Obviously planning on doing some washes on some of the metallics, especially like the copper. That'll look really good, like with some wash and weather. Um, some of the other spots, probably some touch-ups. I'm sure there's going to be a couple spots. Thought about doing, there's like a bunch of like little teeth on like the cars and on like the edges of some of the buildings. Thought about doing some of those. White, have not decided yet. I kind of like the metallic on them. Otherwise it would be some combination of like a metallic and a white. Obviously because it'd be like kind of worn off metal. But just so they kind of stand out a little bit, I think that would look good. But again, I don't want it to be like full on like tons of color, like overly Christmassy. A lot of time like the wash will take care of that. If like it seems like you just have too many crazy colors all over the place, wash can kind of bring everything in together. Like a dark wash, either a Nuln Oil or Agrex Earthshade or something like that. Kind of like dull everything back down if it's a little too much. I don't think that's necessarily an issue, but it's like borderline because there's so many bright colors. But at the same time, I do want them to kind of stand out as well. So it's like a fine line in between the perfect amount of color and too much color. But I feel like with orc stuff, it can be just a little random and a little colorful and still like grimdark. So I think that's the goal. The most important thing is to be like orky and like, you know, apocalypse grimdark. But I also want it to be a little colorful. Yeah, there we go. Not as worried about the bottoms, but I feel like I might as well spend a little. All right, so it kind of wraps around this metal piece right here too. I just want to be careful where I'm touching. That's what I mean about the detail though, because at first I was like, wait a minute. This is just like a piece of scatter terrain. It's not like connected to a building. So like, what the heck is powering this thing? And then I actually noticed when I was just kind of looking at it, the attention to detail they made when they designed this. They actually have like a little battery down in the corner over here. So that's what I mean about this set is just absolutely amazing. The fact that they took the time to design like a little wire wrapped around here and then coming down in here, and then on the other side it's got a little battery hooked to it. Like the fact that they even thought to do that, I just got to give them so much mad props for, because it's just absolutely awesome. Absolutely freaking awesome set. Such a good deal too. The original Kill Team set was a really good deal, or like I don't know if you would call it the original because they had like some previous iterations of Kill Team. But as far as I'm concerned, the Sector Imperialis one was like quote unquote the original. The one I'm referring to at least. That was like a really good set. Everybody really liked that. It was a great value. But then the Sector Mechanicus one was good, but it wasn't as good. I liked that it was Tau Space Marines. As opposed to like the first one was the AdMech Gene Stealer Cult, which they were like, they're not as popular. AdMech Gene Stealer Cult, so I think that's why I prefer like Tau Space Marines. I mean, I don't want to say like every set should be Space Marines, but at the same time, that is their bread and butter, so I understand that they make like pretty much every set Space Marines. So while I don't blame them for mixing it up with Gene Stealer Cult AdMech, I think that probably there was a lot of extra Gene Stealer Cult AdMech laying around that nobody ever like built or painted or played. So as where Tau is like pretty popular, but the Marines are like the most popular. But then again, you could argue that it was Reavers, which I mean, Reavers pretty much never had like Reaver Sergeant was pretty good in Kill Team, but Reavers are like never actually good. So they did kind of like get shortchanged there. But again, I mean, I would rather have Space Marine Reavers than pretty much Gene Stealer Cult anything. Just because I never ended. I mean, the Gene Stealer Cult models are good and everything. I just never really went for it. I think if anything, I would play a mix between Tyranids, like some actual Gene Stealers, and Gene Stealer Cult, but they never really like jumped out at me, honestly. All right, so I think I knocked out all the wires that I was carrying to do. There's a couple there that I had missed. I want to do the wood. There's like one little wire right here. Just so happen to notice. A couple little broken off wires right there. That looks good. Okay, I'm happy with that. Happy with everything. Let's do that wood. Alright, so here's a skeleton horde. One of my favorite also of the contrast paints. I do it for like all the bones, skulls, and then obviously works really good for wood also. Um, Definitely make sure you get some of those ball bearings, because these contrast paints got to be mixed up real well. I'm going to do a little bit of this. Oh, whoops. Out of frame. I'm going to paint this so you can't see. Not on purpose though. Tempted to do like a couple different of the brown contrasts, just because like wood would be different colors obviously. But I think what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to do them all with this, and then I might just darken up a couple little spots with a different brown. Like after this is dry or whatever. Or maybe I'll do like a null and oil wash. You can pretty much do whatever. Thing about these contrast paints though is they look cool when you're painting them on, and sometimes they'll look one way, but when they dry, a lot of times they look completely different because like the pigment kind of settles down into like the recesses, which is the effect you're going for. It's basically like a wash, a base, color, and then like a highlight all in one, or so they are meant to be. Some are a little better than others. I love them. I think they're great, but I think for most people probably you could get away with like, I don't know. I think the ideal number would probably be about 10 of them, and you'd have everything you needed. I think like most people probably don't need like every red that they offer, or like every blue, green, etc. There's like a bunch of flesh tones. Probably don't need all the flesh tones. I like having all of them because, you know, when you're looking for a little diversification on your fleshy models, definitely nice to have all the options. But I don't think it's necessary to have like the whole line. I mean, you don't really use that much of them, and the ones that you do use a lot, I feel like you use up the same ones. Like I obviously like commission paint like whole armies, and pretty much the ones I go through are like skeleton horde, black templar, and apothecary white. Those are like the ones that I like use up. Guilliman flesh, that's another one. But other than that, most of them you rarely crack open. Tesseract glow is technically not a contrast paint, but acts exactly like one. That is like amazing for like plasma pistols and plasma guns and stuff like that. Huge fan of that one. Again, you'll probably never use a whole one in your life, no matter how many things you paint. Definitely would recommend that. Again, even though technically it's a technical, it's basically a contrast paint, but it came out afterwards, so they labeled it a technical for some reason. Or maybe I don't know. Maybe I just don't understand how the technicals work exactly. Because for me, most of those are like the base, like basing paints. So you can't really tell that well right now, but once they're dry, they should look pretty awesome, hopefully. I've done quite a bit of wood with these before, so pretty confident how they're going to look. And like if you want to darken them up, you can either add a different contrast paint afterwards or like a second coat. And then obviously like they're a little shiny now, but they dry pretty good. I'm definitely looking to not as concerned with getting a little bit on the edges or whatever either, just because everything around them is like kind of darker and they tend to like flow towards the cracks, so it'll act kind of like a wash around the edges anyway. But obviously I don't want to be like overly sloppy with them. I would imagine those little gauges that we did on the copper containers are probably dry down in there now. So we could bust out the tesseract if we wanted to. But there was also like one little touch up where I missed a copper pipe that I want to go back and do. A couple little spots I noticed along the way. So we'll probably do at least one more video in this series for the terrain. Probably a couple more, honestly. But I think at least the next video, I'll be like what I would consider to be like, you know, tabletop ready / done painting this set. And then anything after that would just be like random little details or like additional stuff I would add in. But hopefully this style of video people like. I mean, obviously doing like the like kind of paint with me or like build and paint style videos are good because people like to watch them, and you know, podcast style like hobby along or whatever. I've noticed that like the view hours are really high on these type of videos, so people definitely like to just leave some of the longer stuff on and go, and then they don't need to watch like every second but can look up for like different spots or speed through them or you know, whatever. So I definitely want to keep doing this style of videos. I'm just not sure if skipping little bits and stuff like that is kind of like, oh man, I wish you would have shown that. Because I've had people do that with obviously like some of the magnetization videos and stuff like that where people want to see it. So it makes sense if I can show it all. But I mean, I like the idea of this whole set having been painted up like real time live on the videos. So you can literally see every step as I go, how long it actually took me and what effects. So even if you're not like painting at the same speed or maybe you're painting faster, but regardless, you know roughly, well, we're at 2 hours right now. So, you know, I roughly have spent like 6 hours and 30 minutes or 6 hours and 15 minutes painting up this set. So this is what you could potentially have in the same amount of time, slightly longer or slightly shorter. Because I don't think I did any like groundbreaking techniques here that someone couldn't like replicate themselves. Yeah, so because I forgot to do those little straps as well. You know what? They look pretty well dry now. So one way or the other, you'll either get to see the little heat wraps painted, or they're not dry yet, and you'll get to see what not to do. So there's none on that one. None on that one. So it's just the one here and then the two big ones, I think. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to do so many ridiculous videos with like the terrain set that I don't make videos for like the Krieg or the orcs. Because I definitely want to do like a how-to for like the Krieg and the commandos. And you know what? I think I'm going to do contrast paints. Because I actually haven't seen any. I saw like Games Workshop put out the Krieg and commando video. Did not watch it though. But I have not seen, I want to say maybe like one or two other ones like popped up on my feed that I didn't watch from like random other painters, but none of them were like contrast paints. And I think the new models will look really good with contrast paints. So whether I do completely contrast paints, obviously I do like some metallics also, or just like a bunch of contrasts, I think like the contrast paints are going to look really good on the orcs. So I definitely want to do at least some. And then just because it's like all part of the same set, I would just assume do like the Krieg in contrast as well. Plus the fact that I haven't seen someone else do it. So I think that would be extra cool if I do the Krieg and the Orcs contrast paints. So I think I'm probably going to go that route. But yeah, that looks pretty good. I could definitely do probably a second coat of yellow. I think really though, I could probably just do a wash. On the yellow and achieve the same effects. The wood doesn't like look great right now showing up. But once it's dry, it will look better. Or alternatively, we can do a different color or add some colors or a second coat, whatever. But it should look good. I've done quite a bit of like wood grain with that. So let's kind of just set this up here and kind of take a look at what we've got here all finished up. So again, the goal with the with this stuff too was that basically we can have like the red or the blue. So you can see like the whole building is red on one side, blue on the other. Or alternatively, we could do it like this, where you have like the blue on this side and what is it, this side and this side, and then red on that side and that side, basically. So, but I think we've achieved the main goal, what we were looking for. Got quite a bit of color on here. Not perfect, but got this set painted up in about 6.5 hours and definitely happy with how it looks right now. Could argue that it is completed, and then anything after this is just gravy. I would say we still got a little bit to go, but definitely looking very cool. And just for effect, a little bit of the extra lighting. Obviously, like the blue lights and the green lights kind of add a little extra cool to it. Very cool though. Very happy with how it came out. So that is roughly 6.5 hours of painting up the Warhammer 40,000 Ork Shanty Town or Kill Team Octarius terrain. This is Warhammer Man Studios. I'm Warhammer Man. If you liked the content today and enjoyed the video, please take the time to give it a like, give it a share anywhere on social media or with your buddies, and please subscribe to the channel. We have reached over 1,000 subscribers, so I'm definitely going to do something special for that. Have not decided exactly what I'm going to do, but some type of thank you giveaway at this point in time. Just trying to, continue building up the channel and sometime in the near future, potentially monetizing it as well. So I do appreciate everyone taking the time to like, share, subscribe. Make sure you check us out for Warhammer 40,000, Age of Sigmar, Necromunda, obviously Kill Team, and also Warcry content as well. Everything from building, painting, reviews, reactions, and magnetizations, lighting, customizations, conversions, and everything in between. So if you have not checked out the previous videos, check out part 1, part 2, and this is part 3, and there will be a part 4 to come as well. We will do the last few details and kind of finish up this set, add in some extra little bits of weathering for like washes and maybe some of that nithilnac, whatever it is, that little green oxide stuff over the copper, and we'll add in like a little tesseract glow and the last little bit to have this ready to be played on. And then after that, paint up some Krieg and some Orcs and do some battle reports, which is very, very exciting because it has been a long time since I have played any type of games. pretty much for the last like year and a half. Just been like building and painting because it's been crazy busy. But with this new iteration of Kill Team, I am very, very excited to play some games. So hopefully battle reports coming in the near future. But that's it for today, guys. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Warhammer Man Studios. I'm Warhammer Man, and I'm out of here.